The story of the great hardware shift of 2026 begins with a quiet disruption from a name we once thought was trailing behind. The Intel Arc Pro B70 was a polite introduction, a budget-friendly spark that drew its life directly from the motherboard like a parasite, proving that local AI didn't need a power plant to survive. But its older sibling, the Intel Arc Pro B70, has arrived to burn down the old neighborhood. This card isn't asking for permission anymore. Coming equipped with 32 gigabytes of high-speed memory and demanding its own external power source to fuel its ambitions. At a price tag well under $1,000, it represents a direct threat to the established order of overpriced professional silicon. To see what this new era of affordable muscle can really do, we didn't just stop at one card. We filled the chassis with 4 of these B70 units. This creates a monstrous system with 128 gigabytes of total video memory, a number that would have cost a small fortune just 2 years ago. This setup reflects the frantic escalation of local AI experimentation, where hobbyists and professionals alike are desperate to run massive models without selling their souls to a subscription service. The core question haunting every enthusiast in 2026 is simple. Can the Intel B70 deliver the legendary performance of a high-end Nvidia card at a mere fraction of the cost, or is this just a cheap imitation of true power? The competition isn't sitting idly by while Intel tries to seize the throne of the middle class. Enter the Nvidia RTX Pro 4000 Blackwell, a card that looks like a precision instrument with its slim design and cutting-edge GDDR7 memory. It boasts higher bandwidth and the prestige of the green logo, but it carries a price tag that is nearly double what Intel is asking for the same amount of memory. Then we have the AMD Radeon AIR 9700, which until recently was the champion of the budget-conscious professional. On paper, these cards from Nvidia and AMD look like the clear winners, with specifications that suggest a level of speed Intel shouldn't be able to touch. However, specs on a glossy PDF are often just a polite way of lying to your wallet. The B70's primary weapon isn't raw speed. It is price efficiency, offering that crucial 32 gigabytes of memory capacity for significantly less money. In the world of AI, memory capacity is the size of the room your digital brain lives in, while bandwidth is just how fast it can run across that room. We have reached a point where the size of the room matters more than the sprint speed of the occupant. It is time to move past spec sheet theory and see how these machines actually behave when they are asked to think under pressure. The real testing begins not in a laboratory but in the software stack where the true power of a GPU is either unleashed or strangled. We used the Llama.cpp and VLLM inference engines, the heavy lifters of the local AI world, to run models like the Qwen 34 billion parameter beast. Early results from these tests reveal a truth that the big tech companies would rather you ignore. Performance in 2026 depends far more on how the software talks to the hardware than on the hardware itself. You can have a jet engine, but if the fuel lines are clogged with bad code, you aren't going anywhere. Intel has clearly spent their time in the trenches, because their optimized software stack performs exceptionally well during the initial phase of processing a prompt. When the workload shifts, we see that cross-platform tools like Vulkan can bridge the gap, improving certain tasks across different brands of hardware. But the real star is VLLM, which manages to squeeze out the highest amount of throughput, proving that efficiency is a software problem. We also conducted concurrency testing, simulating a scenario where multiple users are hammering the system at once. This isn't just about one person asking a bot for a poem. It's about seeing if the system buckles when it has to handle a real-world workload. Then the unthinkable happened. Something that should have been impossible according to the laws of the Nvidia-dominated universe. In our head-to-head tests running the exact same model, the Intel B70 actually outperformed the much more expensive Nvidia card in terms of how fast it generated words. Not only was the token generation faster, but the time it took for the machine to give its first response was shorter as well. This result flies in the face of everything we were told about Nvidia's superior memory bandwidth being the only thing that matters. It turns out that for many common tasks, the cheaper Intel card is actually the more effective brain. This reality is a cold shower for anyone who believes that spending more money always buys more performance. It shows us that real-world results are dictated by implementation and the specific characteristics of the workload, not just the numbers on the box. The B70 is essentially doing more with less, which is the ultimate nightmare for a company that relies on high profit margins. Why would a rational user pay twice as much for a card that responds slower to their commands? This is where the mask of the tech giants begins to slip, revealing that they have been selling us brand loyalty rather than raw utility. But the tech giants have a few tricks left in their sleeves, and the narrative takes a sharp turn when we change the rules of the game. When we switched the model format to something called Activation-Aware Quantization, or AWQ, the Nvidia card suddenly regained its footing. In this specific configuration, Nvidia pulled ahead in both processing the initial prompt and generating the final answer. The way the card scales its performance when multiple users are connected also improved significantly, showing its professional pedigree. This demonstrates a recurring theme in the high-stakes world of AI hardware. There is no such thing as a best GPU, the herd, and uses whatever format is trending on social media. You might find yourself trapped with hardware that isn't optimized for your needs. The tech companies act this way because they want to lock you into their specific ecosystems, making it harder for you to switch to a competitor. They create proprietary paths that only their expensive hardware can walk comfortably. Your defense is to understand your specific workflow before you swipe your credit card. As we look at the AMD entry, the Radeon AI R9700, we see a tragic example of great hardware held back by a lack of vision. On paper, it has everything you could want. Massive memory capacity, higher bandwidth than the Intel cards, and a competitive price. Yet in nearly every real-world test we performed, it fell behind the competition. The reason isn't a lack of physical power. It's the software ecosystem, specifically the ROCm platform, which still feels like a construction site compared to Nvidia's polished CUDA. AMD has built a powerhouse of a card, but they haven't given it a language that the rest of the world speaks fluently. The lesson here is blunt and perhaps a bit cruel for the AMD fans. Software maturity is the invisible hand that determines whether a piece of hardware is a tool or a paperweight. Intel has caught up by focusing on the user's ability to actually run models without a degree in computer engineering. AMD, despite its hardware prowess, is struggling to convince the average user that their software won't break at the first sign of a complex task. For the user, this means that buying based on hardware specs alone is a gamble that rarely pays off in the current climate. Our evaluation moved beyond simple text and into the heavy, creative world of image and video generation. We threw large diffusion models and modern video synthesis frameworks at these cards to see if the budget Intel setup would crumble under the weight of visual data. The results were surprisingly level. Both the expensive Nvidia units and the affordable Intel cards produced visual quality that was indistinguishable from one another. While there were modest differences in how fast the images were generated, the real hurdle was once again software compatibility. Some creative tools simply wouldn't recognize the Intel cards without a specific workaround, which is the price you pay for being an early adopter. This reinforces the idea that we are currently in a transition period where the hardware is ready, but the bridges connecting that hardware to our favorite apps are still being built. The tech companies know this, and they use that friction to keep you buying the expensive, supported options. They rely on your fear of things not working out of the box to justify their inflated prices. As a user, you have to decide if you are willing to spend a few hours troubleshooting to save a few $1,000s. In 2026, that trade-off is becoming more attractive by the day. When we scaled up to the 4 GPU configuration with the B70 cards, we expected a linear explosion of speed, but physics had other plans. While the speed at which the system processed the initial prompt doubled as we hoped, the speed at which it generated tokens actually dropped slightly. This is the interconnect bottleneck, a physical reality where the GPUs spend more time talking to each other over the motherboard's lanes than they do actually thinking. It is a reminder that you can't just throw more hardware at a problem and expect it to disappear without understanding the system-level constraints. This is a classic trap that many users fall into, believing that doubling the cards will double the speed. The tech companies are more than happy to sell you 4 cards knowing full well that your motherboard can't handle the traffic. They profit from your misunderstanding of how data moves through a system. To avoid being the victim of this scaling paradox, you must realize that more GPUs are for bigger models, not necessarily faster ones. If you want to run a model that is too big for a single card, you need the extra memory. But don't expect the experience to be lightning fast. The true value of the multi-GPU setup finally revealed itself when we switched to a massive coding model, the Qwen 3-coder 30 billion. In this scenario, all 4 B70 cards were fully utilized. Their combined memory capacity allowing for a huge context window. This means the AI can remember thousands of lines of code at once without getting confused or crashing. The performance became stable and predictable, proving that this kind of setup is a specialized tool for specialized work. It is not a gaming rig on steroids. It is a localized data center for those who need to process massive amounts of information privately. This brings us to the final verdict on the Intel Arc Pro B70. It has officially become the new workhorse for anyone who wants serious AI power without the corporate tax. It offers competitive performance, massive memory capacity, and a price tag that makes the competition look greedy. Its weaknesses are almost entirely found in the software, which is a problem that time and updates will likely solve. The landscape has shifted, and the days when you had to pay 5 figures for a professional AI workstation are coming to a close. The broader message here isn't just about which brand of silicon is better. It is about a fundamental shift in the market where affordable, professional-grade hardware is finally catching up to the demands of modern software. We are witnessing the democratization of intelligence, where the power to create, analyze, and automate is no longer trapped behind a green-colored paywall. The villains of the industry will continue to try and convince you that their proprietary features are worth the premium. But the data tells a different story. The Intel B70 is a signal that the user is finally starting to regain some leverage in this relationship. As you look toward your next build or upgrade, ask yourself if you are buying a tool or a brand name. Are you choosing the hardware that fits your specific needs, or are you just paying for the comfort of a familiar logo? The most expensive option is rarely the most intelligent one in a field that moves as fast as artificial intelligence. Don't let the marketing departments of billion-dollar corporations dictate the limits of your creativity or your budget. Take the time to understand the software you use, the models you run, and the bottlenecks that actually hold you back. The lesson of 2026 is clear. The hardware wars are no longer won by the fastest specs, but by the best value and the most open ecosystems. The Intel Arc Pro B70 isn't perfect, but it is a massive step toward a future where everyone has access to high-level AI capabilities. If you found this deep dive into the silicon trenches valuable, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation into the hidden costs of tech. What do you think is more important for your work, raw speed or massive memory capacity? Let us know in the comments, and let's start a conversation that the tech giants would rather not hear.